Hello and welcome to Socialism for All live stream number 8. This is being recorded on March 1st, 2022. We stream regularly, currently scheduled for Tuesday and Saturday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. This whole streaming thing is kind of new, as you can tell by the fact that it's just number 8 live stream. But, we do usually more content on the YouTube channel, whether it's Marxist audiobooks and sort of history discussion, trying to learn from history, applying those lessons to current struggles against capitalism for socialism, as well as, doing some current events commentary, not just audiobooks on the channel. But anyway, we're here in the live stream, and I'm a little less ragged today than I was on Saturday. I still have been spending most of my spare time reading everything that I can get my hands on about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I feel that this is a fairly ominous possible lead into like a World War I redux type of situation. Obviously the sides and factions are a little bit different now, but basically we know capitalism becomes imperialism, and imperialists fight over territory. Capitalism's not a stable system. They have to both exploit their home population and natural resources for profit, and then at a certain point they have to expand beyond that and start carving up the globe. And there's a lot of headbutting between imperialists in that process. So now that the USSR is gone and Russia is rebuilding its economy 30 years later, I think that we're seeing some of the lead up to another major inter-imperialist conflict or world war. So that's kind of my take. The Bolshevik Revolution helped to give relatively more peace to the world by taking, some imperialist aggression out of it. We need to do this again, in my opinion. And that's why we're doing a Marxist education and discussion channel. So, I'll just say before we get into the chat, I'm working currently on a video, it'll probably be up tonight or maybe tomorrow, about, there's basically, as maybe some of the pieces of another world war line up, what do we know contributed to World War II, the crash of 1929? There may be something like that in the works because, capitalism, even when regulated, has a built-in boom-bust cycle. It has ups and downs. It crashes regularly. But we're in a relatively deregulated environment as far as the economic system. And 2008 was the first massive global capitalist crisis in a long time. Arguably, we were headed for another one when COVID hit. And you can see that the basically any economic indicator you look at started to crash in spring of 2020, and then it was saved and the line kept going up. I think that they can't keep doing that forever, and in fact the article I was reading is saying there's probably going to be a cataclysm coming up. Also right now, as far as Russia, there's a lot of sanctions being put on. Access is being denied through SWIFT, which is an international funds transfer system. So Russia's being cut off. The ruble has dropped like 50% or more in value. That could have kind of a cascade of effects that are not entirely predictable. It's a big system, the world economy, with a lot of variables. And it is, not maybe sheer chaos, but it is, it is the market anarchy that socialists try to avoid in fighting off capitalism and establishing socialism. We're trying to get away from this sort of chaotic anarchic market system and impose well-regulated plans for economic development, not for profit, not for the whims of what some capitalists wager might be profitable, but what people actually need in accordance with an economic plan. So these are some of the basic ideas. For example, if you go over to the Twitter, it's on the screen, but twitter.com/socialism for all. One of the things I retweeted today is that Russia and Ukraine grow like over a quarter, 29% of the world's wheat. Wheat, of course, is one of the, like, wheat, rice, and corn to a lesser extent. Then, of course, you have, potatoes and things down there. One of the basic staples of, it tends to be rice more in the east and wheat more in the west. Obviously, there's overlap. But anyway, this is like one of the basic staples enabling some kind of a reliable, sedentary, settled, quote, civilized life where there's, not nomadic hunter-gathering, but regular agriculture. That's not good that suddenly, you would have massive disruptions in the part of the world that, grows and exports nearly a third of the wheat on the world market. This can probably start by creating shortages in the Middle East, and we'll just go from there. We've already seen food prices rising dramatically, being raised in the United States, along with the price of everything else. So anyway, the idea being put in an economic crash, and capitalism's not going to get any more stable from that type of a situation. That's where you start getting into real danger of extremist movements and all kinds of things. So I guess that's my intro for today, and that's probably the next video that's going to be up on the channel. Also, I'll be talking soon, I don't know if today, maybe in the next few days, about the new COVID. The CDC is basically going full COVID denialist at this point. That was just announced on Friday last week, and I don't know. It's kind of too much. But let's get into the chat now and see what people are talking about. So just want to remind everybody the rules. This is not a debate bro stream, and this is more of a facilitated discussion. So 3 rules: write every comment as if it will be read by me on air. 2, no fighting. So kind of coming off of write every comment as if it will be read by me on air. Don't fill up the chat with like tons of just chatter that I have to scroll through, let alone like nasty belligerent chatter to each other. Anyway. 3, don't feed trolls, just point them out and I will ban them. And failure to adhere to these rules will result in either a timeout or a ban for the day. I'll let you back in for the next one, so no need to appeal. But again, trolls, not so much. Trolls will just be gone. So all right, let's get into the chat and see what's going on. Many people showing up today. Even my belated delayed stream manager stats say 30 people are in here, so there's probably more actually in here than that. Let me just scroll up to the top and see where I left off. So a lot of people saying hello. All right, Forza Fernando Alonso says, this is a statement from the Greek Communist Party, the 3rd biggest communist party of Europe after the Russian and the Belarusian one. Yeah, so I was just sharing on the Twitter and on the YouTube. The Finnish Bolshevik, I'm sure most of you know, is another YouTuber, Marxist-Leninist YouTuber, and came to the same conclusion that I did about, which I think is the, actual Marxist-Leninist conclusion. This is an inter-imperialist conflict between Russia on the one side, NATO, EU, USA, IMF, all that established imperialist stuff. On the other side, with Ukraine caught in the middle. Ukraine, of course, part of the Soviet Union. Then in the early 90s, there was a few years of, in the mid-90s, trying to figure out what the hell was going to happen. And then, we'll say at least in the early 2000s, Putin becomes president, and things start to sort of restabilize around 2000. And Ukraine starts to make its decision, because it's not Russia, it's a much smaller country. It starts to decide, which way are we going to go? Are we going to go more towards Western Europe and strive for integration into their economic and strategic systems? Or are we going to ally with Russia? The majority of Ukraine has pretty much always leaned slightly, like 60-40, 65-35, towards Europe from everything that I've seen. However, there's substantial support, more in the east, southeast. There's more like ethnic Russians and people who tend to favor Russia. And the politics, if you look, not just back to 2014, but back to 2000, even into the 90s, this has just been an ongoing question for Ukraine. some, there have been significant forks in the road along the way, but that is basically the dilemma that Ukraine has found itself in, caught between two rival capitalist gangs, basically. So anyway, but Finball put that statement from the Greek Communist Party into his analysis, and I did share that video. I thought it was a pretty good breakdown, and I concur. This is not a time for the proletariat to be picking sides. That's not what Lenin said. That's not the Marxist-Leninist position. You don't pick sides between imperialists. We're not trying to pick like one bourgeois nation state over the other. This is class struggle. So build the working class, fight for socialism. Defeat to all imperialists. Victory to all proletarians. No matter which, nation state, bourgeois borders you find yourself in currently. That's not to say, of course, that borders are purely a bourgeois thing. I mean, but we're talking about the age right now of capitalism and the bourgeois nation state. And, of course, in socialism, there will be those borders for a while as well, inherited from capitalism, and to keep some kind of order as we build socialism towards a, stateless, classless, moneyless society, etc. That's all down the line. That's while you're, in the meantime, while you're still fighting off imperialism and there's still capitalism in the world, you're just not there yet. But that's our goal, revolutionary defeatism. Now, you have to be really organized to be able to pull that off. And another thing I will be putting up on the channel is more commentary on Lenin's, what's the actual name? It's a kind of a long title. The Defeat of One's Own Government in the Imperialist War, 1915. That's a hard thing to pull off. Lenin writes about how hard it is. You have to be really organized. And, the Marxist movement in Russia in 1915 was super well organized. It's something to aspire to these days, because if you don't have that level of organization and influence, you can't turn an imperialist war into a victory for the proletariat. So anyway, good link. I saw that in Finball's video. Finball also put out a good video. So let's see. And Forza says, if I can read it out live, this would be amazing. I'll maybe come back to it. I don't want to get too behind the chat, but I'll open it in another tab here. So, all right, where are we? So Forza answers a question from Ediov. Says, Ediov asks, nice, my best friend is Greek. I'm from Syria. What is your opinion on the Syriza party? So left party there. Forza says, before they got in government, they were opportunists. Now they've just become liberals. Clearly supporting NATO and EU. Before that, they were doing it, but not that clearly. When they got into government, they were just exposed. Yeah, that's my understanding of it as well. With Syriza, so this is what I was talking about earlier. During the post-2008, early 2010s resistance and discussion about the global economic meltdown, there were some of these parties like Syriza, which came to power on an anti-austerity platform. And since we're talking so much this week about NATO and the EU and the IMF and debt traps and imperialism and war, well, part of the thing there was in 2008, you had a global financial meltdown. People couldn't pay their bills. The whole system just went belly up. But loans were still due. People had to still make payments to the IMF and all that stuff. That's part of the debt trap formula is when you sign the loan, you have to prioritize making those payments to the Western imperialist bank over everything else. So if you have to slash social spending, then slash social spending. And if you don't do it, then the military arm of imperialism will probably do some kind of a coup and put in a neoliberal government who definitely will prioritize the bank payments. That's pretty much what it's all about. So Syriza ran, as far as I understand, ran on like an anti-austerity, fuck the IMF kind of, platform. So I didn't know much about them before, but they're opportunist not going into it. And then when faced with the situation of how do we actually resist the IMF, how do we actually stand in an anti-austerity type of situation, they got exposed. They couldn't do it. So, yeah. Anyway, let's continue with the chat. Punch Elder, thank you as well. And actually, so this conversation continues. Ediov says, does Greece have any left-wing party or movement that Forza recommends to follow and read about that is active today? And Forza says a really strong communist party, although the labor movement is not at the best situation. It is maybe even now the strongest labor movement in Europe. And so I think just reposted the link too. Yeah, that's what I hear about the KKE is that they are one of the stronger parties. But again, I think that the point about the labor movement is really important because, okay, you have your party, you have, the Vanguard, well organized and educated, and that's great. But you also need the mass component. You need the masses of workers organized in mass organizations that can, keep people who are not in the inner circle at least class conscious on the right side of things, prevent people in the masses from falling for bourgeois lines and supporting, bourgeois provocations and distractions and all that kind of stuff. And if you, don't have those mass organizations in play, when the Vanguard makes a call, the proletariat's going to be all disorganized. This is what I'm telling people, in the U.S., where there's a lot of work to do. I mean, this is imperial core. It's maybe the last country in the world to ever have a revolution. I don't know. But I'm telling people just get into something because, even a weak organization, you're at least meeting people and you have some contacts to maybe do spin-off projects or something. But if you're just totally unorganized, it's a problem. It's a problem. So anyway, continuing. Question to S4A from Adiov. Do I think the U.S. is committing suicide by sanctioning Russia since capitalism is the current worldwide mode of production? I don't know exactly why you ask. So I guess when people ask questions, try to explain where you're coming from. I don't really know what you mean. So they sanction countries constantly. Are you saying that it's such a big country? I mean, I mentioned before, the ruble is crashing. That could have sort of far-reaching unintended consequences. I don't know. But one thing that we know about the bourgeoisie is that they are okay with having world wars. So, you know what I mean? Like, it just, our idea of experiencing society, of experiencing daily life, we are subject to forces that the bourgeoisie just is not. They can afford things. No matter what, they're okay. And they're okay with, Europe being half burned down. They're okay with mass destruction. As long as their system survives and their, intergenerational rule as they pass down their, company stock from, William Wentworth the Fifth to the Sixth, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're going to be okay. So I don't know specifically what you mean. I do think that sanctions on Russia could have unintended consequences, and I certainly think it could escalate into making Russia more desperate. But this is, one of the themes in the commentary I've been making this week is up until a couple of weeks ago, everybody was like, the U.S. and NATO are constantly trying to get the world to think that Russia's invading Ukraine, and every year they don't. But, and it's smart. And, Putin's too smart for that. He's not going to fall for that, et cetera, et cetera. And then he did. But then people were also, the same analysts were refusing to say that, well, not invading was the smart move for years and years. How is invading, how did that become the smart move? No, they just fell for a provocation. So increasing the amount of desperation of Russian capitalists, yeah, who knows? It probably just escalates towards war. But again, the bourgeoisie doesn't necessarily shy away from that. So otherwise, I'm not sure where you're coming from and asking. All right. Jakar wonders, would a new non-Trotskyist international steer the Western and international left in the right direction? By which I assume you mean correct direction. Chuckle, reasonable chuckle there. Yeah, so just to clarify for people, there is a fourth international. So, brief history of the international. There was an international in Marx's day, International Working Men's Association. Then there was a second international that went up to World War I, and then the vast majority, or like significant parts of the second international, betrayed the working class. They had agreed prior to the war that if there was an inter-imperialist war, what eventually became known as the Great War or World War I, that if war between the bourgeoisie broke out, the proletarians should be encouraged by socialist leadership to rise up against the bourgeoisie, not to kill each other, right? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? But in fact, that was what a lot of the Second International did, and Lenin was, for one, none too pleased with it. And so in the aftermath of this, and from the basis of having done the Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin and his people helped to set up the Third Communist International, or the Comintern. This got disbanded in World War II, basically, and there really hasn't been anything quite since. Now, the Trotskyists did set up the Fourth International, but like everything Trotskyist, parties split and split and split and split. And I think I saw one video that was like, in the UK alone, where there's a lot of Trotskyists, there are like as many Fourth Internationals as there are parties. I don't know if that's fully accurate, but I think that was like what the video was showing. So anyway, hence non-Trotskyist Fourth International. Do I think that could help to steer the left in the correct direction? Yeah, I do. I do. And I think that the loss of the Comintern was probably a huge loss that was enormously destructive. Were there reasons for it? Kind of, but yes, I do think I would like to see that come back. So there are things currently, and the name is escaping me off the top of my head. So for one thing, there's the Progressive International, which is about as weak as, you might expect from hearing the name. I think we need better than that. The other one, I want to say LeftNet, but I don't think it is that. Anyway, if somebody knows what I'm talking about. There is a sort of pseudo-international, but I think it's not very militant today. Yes, I think that back in the day, the Third International did a tremendous amount of good, and I think that we have suffered for a lack of that, I guess is my answer. Punch Elder, I went from Christian conservative to libertarian to liberal to democratic socialist to socialist. I got out of the debate bro left and bread tube dead end, and now I'm here. Well, good, welcome. I hope that you get some useful stuff out of this. I got exposed to Marxism like over 20 years ago, and although I strayed from it for a while and did some of the errors you now see out there, widespread, working with libertarians and shit like that, I eventually came to a point myself where I realized just none of that was going to work. And although, some of the reason I did that in the first place was the left was so tiny. Also, just I didn't entirely know what I was doing. But it wasn't like there was a large left where you could just sort of walk in and, coast along with it. So, I think as we rebuild the Marxist left, it's going to be easier for people to just not make those errors, and there's going to be more voices sort of encouraging and supporting people to hold more correct lines. So I think that we are witnessing the rebuilding of a Marxist movement. Question is, can we hang on to it? What do we do with it as it grows? So anyway, and I think that that's not a totally atypical type of journey. I ran a poll asking people what their tendency was a while ago, and that's a very people the USA, where a lot of my audience is, it's a pretty right-wing country. And so people are starting from somewhere on the right because that's what we get socialized into. And as you get out in the world and start working and paying rent and whatever it is you try to do, trying to meet your life goals in this economy, you start wondering pretty fast, like, why is this not working as advertised? And, why is there so much conflict in the world? Why is the war on terror happening? What is austerity? Where does it come from? All this kind of stuff. And yeah, we want to make it as easy and accessible as possible for people to come to actual actual Marxism. Excuse me, I gotta take a sip of water. We want to make it as easy as possible for people with as little work as possible to get into the zone of where things are working out. So that's what it's about for me anyway. And words of appreciation and encouragement. All right, got a troll, just got a Banjitsu. Baijitsu. There we go. Okay. Where were we? Can I talk a little bit about the next economic meltdown that I was saying I was making a video about? I mean, I think I've said about as much as I'm going to say here. The video will be out either today or tomorrow. And, the specifics, the Fed thinking about raising interest rates, and you're going to see a lot of companies go under. It's been really easy to get money during this time. Excuse me. I got a cold like a few weeks. I mean, we're in March 1st now, but it's like the end of winter, and just my body is getting tired of being, just looking forward to spring, let's put it that way. But I think I've just got a lot of cold and stuffiness going on. Anyway, so the Fed raising interest rates, it's going to be harder for businesses to get loans. So if companies aren't like really profitable, they're going to have a hard time, and a lot will start failing. And, who knows, like given COVID and everything else, this could be like a really pretty catastrophic drop, but you can see more in that video. It's called, let me see if I can get the business. It's a Business Insider article that I was reading. Insider. The title is Elite Wall Street Investors, Stock Market Crash, Cataclysmic Shift is Here. It's from last week. So if you want to look it up, before 6 hours from now or whenever it's up. Punch Elder continues, to be honest, I'm from a rural part of Central California, and all the politics I identify with was conservative due to my faith until I was in my 20s. Yes, somebody got mad at me actually recently for saying that I'm anti-religion, and while I respect that a lot of working people have some kind of religious faith from like a sincere place, my position is that as a whole, as soon as possible, that should be, engineered out of society probably sooner rather than later, because I think that it does more harm than good. Anyway, I got like a tirade in my inbox from somebody who was like, I'm white and indigenous religion, and I'm like, look, I was making a generalization about, and I think I was specifically talking about like evangelical Christianity and the mega churches and how they actively reinforce capitalism and things like that. One of the ironic things was they were like, in this South American country where my mom lives, she practices an indigenous religion, and which, I mean, most of the indigenous religion that I have any familiarity with at all is more about like, it's more from the hunter-gatherer or sort of close to that mode of production, and it's much more about like harmony with nature and the collective working together, which was the way that people had to do things. It's not like the rapacious greed and individualism of most of the religion like that, is of later modes of production. So let's try to keep this somewhat in context here. But anyway, they were saying that people who practice the indigenous religion were being attacked by Catholics. So how can I be against, religion when... So I was thinking, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Who's attacking? It's Catholics, right? So that seems to me like religious bigotry there. So when I say that it does more harm than good, that's some of what I'm talking about. I think that people are always going to have some kind of a spiritual, like we'll always have more questions than answers in some sense about the universe. Like we're making, with science, we're making amazing strides in just understanding the universe, but there's always going to be aspects of our knowledge that are lacking or just things that are mysterious and beautiful, and people are going to have that impulse of like imagining divinity and things like that. And when I say that it should be probably socially engineered down as much as possible, I think I was also saying in that same stream when I said that this person got angry at me for. I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, I guess my main response to that was like, there definitely were caveats. It's not like everyone who believes in a religion should be lined up and shot. I definitely did not say that, nor is that my position. Just that, I think that it tends to do a lot more harm than good, particularly under capitalism. And, people are going to have some kind of a spiritual belief or feeling, and, I think that that's fine. But you can, I think, I've found my point again. You can reframe these things, I think, in a more secular light a lot of the time, and eliminate some of the more backwards reactionary traditionalist stuff culturally that is not going to be conducive to moving forward into socialism. Anyway, just because faith came up, I remembered that. Once I embraced an agnostic belief, I identified as libertarian until 2018. Yeah, so the new atheist thing and agnosticism, there's a lot of like libertarians there. I think that politically too, that's kind of like this step. Once you get raised in sort of the boomer status quo, and start questioning things, a lot of people become libertarians first because it's virtually identical to the existing system, but seems like a little edgier or something. So it seems different, and then it takes you a few years to realize like this is actually the same as what we have but worse. And so it's like the agnostic. Okay, so you went through a questioning period. Agnosticism is you don't know if there is a God or not. So okay, you sort of put your faith on pause for a minute, became a libertarian, and you were 29, 30 years old. This is a time in, just people's psychological development when, you become more conscious and more capable of reflecting on your relationship with society and the universe and where do we come from and all that stuff. I moved to LA and got more political and volunteered with the Bernie campaign for 2020. And once I realized that I was left of Bernie, as I think a lot of people did, I've become more radicalized since then. So let me just say that's like a very typical story of young, working people, particularly like white conservatives in the U.S. That's not, I mean, I've heard that story many, many times on that same timeline. So welcome, and let's, just try to do something constructive. To Noah says, I feel like Christ's teaching can be interpreted to go hand in hand with many socialist ideas, but it's more the power structure of religion that ends up being adversarial to progression. I mean, when religion is adopted as part of the ruling class ideology, yes. Is it developed as part of ruling class ideology? Not always, but I mean, it is a product of class society, as things that arise within class society. I mean, you had religion before class society, but it had certain different characteristics. But like Christianity, for example, existed prior to being picked up, as like government policy. Even before it was officially government policy, the ruling class can use it as they try to manage society. Excuse me. I think that the thing with that is like the Bible it contradicts itself many times. It is the work of many authors over a long period of time. And it's not just the authorship, it's the fact that it's been retranslated. So when you're retranslating it, you can give all kinds of spin to the which synonym do you pick? You can give all kinds of spin and connotations to what's being said in the translation and editing process. So, it's such a game of telephone with that how do you actually know any of what was in it originally unless you were there? So I think people often, more often than not, are looking at products of like ruling class ideology and like, trying to find the truth in it, and I don't know, just meditate. You probably get there a lot faster on your own. Anyway, Edyav, I mean, do you think sanctioning Russia will hurt the West too? Because Russia engages in Western monetary system, unlike Iran or Syria. Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that there could be wide-ranging, unpredictable effects. The bourgeoisie isn't totally averse to a world war, and I think who knows what they're doing. I'm not sure if I finished saying earlier, talking about the West trying to provoke Russia. This could be what they want too. They may have some 20, 30-year plan that we are not privy to for managing capitalism and imperialism that involves drawing Russia into this and having some worldwide economic meltdown that they're going to rebuild an even worse system out of. So, yeah, I mean, never underestimate NATO and the U.S. and all that in terms of wanting to hang on to capitalism. So even if there's short-term destruction, it doesn't necessarily mean long-term destruction. That is up to the proletariat, and that's just a step a lot of people are not really interested in taking. Everybody's trying to like spectate and cheer on one side. You don't get it. No matter who wins, we lose. That's the only place the system goes. You got to think in classes, not countries. So anyway, Atakulia, very interesting screen names here, adds Russia can cut off Europe from most of its natural gas supply. I mean, that's happening. The U.S. Was interfering with the pipeline, the Nord pipeline that was going to go underwater, not over land. Like this is part of the thing with Ukraine, is pipelines going from Russia, because it's in the north of Russia that there's a lot of these like gas and oil fields, and they got to get it over to Europe. So I mean, there's some other routes that they can take, but Ukraine is a pretty convenient one for a lot of reasons, and getting shell oil in there and stuff is not necessarily good for Russia. So yeah, they were trying to do one north of Europe underwater, and the U.S. is stepping in. So clearly the U.S. feels like that's not necessarily a bad thing. Then the U.S. can sell more oil, if not natural gas. But yeah, anyway, this is imperialism. This is private interests who run the economy for profit, holding the world economy hostage as they see fit to get more profit and territory and all that kind of stuff. So this is why we do socialism. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have? VM Squared adds to Noah. Robert Evans, a journalist and podcast host of Behind the Bastards, talked quite a bit about Christian socialist evolution through history on his podcast today, about how Christians ate and transformed capitalism in response to FDR's strong welfare policies, which he states may have truly... Oh, he states they may have... that sentence is a little... He says that the actions of the Christians is what may truly have staved off a workers' revolution. Yeah, I'm not big on Christian socialism. You don't need the Christianity in there, for starters. It's unnecessary and counterproductive. Also, like, keep in mind just the reactionary role of Christianity in the U.S. Like the temperance movement, and that had all kinds of just prohibition. It's just stick with Marxism. I mean, I guess that's the basic thing I can just say there. All right, Forza update or further comments on Syriza. So it says Syriza ended up freezing Greek state airports and trains for 99 years in privatization funds, reduced pensions, and voted down labor laws in favor of capitalists. And as if it was not bad enough, Syriza voted for zero taxes for Greek ship owners. Keep in mind, Greek ship owners, they are the second biggest power on ships globally. Syriza is the best example of how the Western system uses liberals to frustrate the working class, as they do nothing that they promised, and turn them to depolitization. Excuse me, I'm not going to get that. I left out a syllable, but it wants to stay out. Or the far right. Meanwhile, mainstream media call them communists in order to alter what Marxism really is. And in the same time, they try to exclude them from the media, the communists, the KKE, Greek communists, and other anti-EU, anti-capitalist voices. Yeah, that's the so very good comments there, Forza. What was I just going to say there? So, oh yeah, so about Syriza getting in and then not doing what they promised, this can either cause a disillusionment that makes people just drop out of politics or turn to the far right. So let's talk about, in the U.S. context, Bernie Sanders, for example. The Bernie Sanders campaign I supported because it was clearly drawing people into like hungering for somebody to stand up and fight for working class interests. Now, Bernie obviously betrayed everybody, rolled over twice. It was a major mistake, and I got the sense that he was not serious when he endorsed Hillary and then didn't either form his own party or join the Greens or something like that in 2016. That's the move that a serious person would have made, because you get exactly one chance at trying to gate crash the Democratic Party. They cheated him/us out of it. Well, it's time to go, okay, well, this really needs to get done. We've just made our point. The Democratic Party can't be worked within. Now we're going to go do our own thing. Okay, it was the best opportunity in 50 years to build an independent left that didn't take corporate money and all the stuff that's wrong with U.S. electoral politics, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, that's just, looking at the electoral side of things. Had he got in, what would have happened? We can't say for sure, but, in the example of Syriza, they weren't able to do it because the system, and, Bernie Sanders being on the U.S. side of things might have had some influence. But, I mean, there would have been the wealthiest and most despicable forces in the world trying to stop him from making really any changes to that system. We can't even get healthcare in the United States, but trying to tamper with that system, if in fact he even would have done it. I have like a Bernie Sanders platform evaluation on the books for at some point with S4A, and I just have not, I keep not getting to it because other more important things come up. But I think it's a question for socialists, because again, basically talking about Marxism, at the end of the day, the interest here is how do we advance the Marxist movement. I think you can use movements like that at a time, because you got to evaluate current conditions. At that time, the U.S. left was like so demoralized. You had Occupy, which was in 2011, 2012, the beginnings of people just coming back out and saying the word capitalism again. That was a step forward, okay, at the time. Bernie Sanders taking the same kinds of grievances, putting them on TV every day during the primary, again, a step forward. It was bringing people out who had been really not participating in the struggle at all. So this was a step forward. Arguably now, I think that it's gone about as far as it can. And, all those progressives are basically showing that they're just joining the Democratic Party. So it's the same thing of like, AOC will run on one thing and then either can't deliver or won't deliver if she has the opportunity. And this is what we as Marxists need to keep pointing out to people is like, look, if you're interested in an anti-austerity, anti-imperialist type of agenda for working people, great. We want to encourage you in that. But don't go join the Democrats and other people who have demonstrated that they're opportunists and they're not going to follow through or they can't follow through. We have to build a Marxist movement that actually can do that. So I think that that's the point that people need to put into their propaganda and I mean propaganda in a neutral sense, just something you use to propagate your viewpoint. Has a negative connotation, but originally it just meant, stuff, material you put out. Anyway, I think that people should harp on that, is like, this isn't about damning AOC as a bad person. This is political opportunism. In other words, I don't know if she's a good person or a bad person. It's not really the question. The point is, this is opportunism. And it's not going to get you the results you want. So let's forget about everything else and just move on to the thing that can. Anyway, some discussion of MLK and the Christian. Yeah, I mean, there are times where, for example, African Americans in the United States, there's a lot of church going African Americans. There's a lot of religiosity there. I think that long term, when I say things like you could do a lot of the same things in a secular context, and that long term we should probably try to get religion, engineered out of society whenever that seems like, when the masses are actually ready to let go of it. I think that that should be probably a goal, but trying to organize people now, particularly African Americans, that's probably something that you'll be coming up against. And I'm not part of that community. I mean, I support people trying to organize there who are part of that community, and it's something that will be, the dialogue with the Christian churches for social progress is a conversation that's going to be had, and it will have different stages as that conversation and struggle progresses. You don't want to let it hold you back, though. You can't, that's the overall thing, is it needs to move forward, not backwards. You don't work with the churches just to work with the churches. You got to keep an eye out for the fact that, religion is carrying over a lot of like elements of even feudalism into society. And it has been used to defend capitalism as well. So, you have to be, this is the thing about Marxism. It's not easy. You have to be savvy and you have to actually know what you're doing. So, the importance of developing a good line is paramount. So, what else do we have in here? Eddie, sometimes I feel like Americans protest in weekends only and just symbolically. Well, we certainly saw more than that in 2020 when people didn't have to go to work. I think people are really beaten down. People in the U.S. work like 50 hours a week or something like that. People work some of the longest hours in this country of any comparably developed country. So that's a major factor. When people were actually paid to stay home, what was the first thing people did? Was start like tearing the country apart. This system is not popular. So, there's potential there. But yeah, I know what you're saying. That was actually, for some reason, my first thought when I was looking at the Amir Locke protests was not that there was anything wrong with the protests. They were great. I covered them on the channel. I want to encourage that. But you don't want it to become this just ritual formality where people go out, they say this thing is bad, people openly weep because their loved ones are gone, they fear for their children, they fear for their loved ones, and then nothing changes. It has to be channeled into like effective struggle. And I know people are working really hard on that in that city, Twin Cities, and on that particular issue. But I think it is a danger that we all, need to avoid, is just, having ritual protest that is just part of the system. We need to constantly be alert and vigilant against that when we're planning actions. And honestly, just having more frequent actions, probably a start there. So I've been going for about an hour. I'm just going to take a couple of minute break. I will be right back and we'll resume the stream. All right, and we're back. Station identification. You're listening to Socialism for All, the Tuesday live stream at twitch.tv/socialism S4A. These streams are scheduled Tuesday and Saturday currently, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, and we just go for like a couple hours, and I just kind of read from the chat. So, continuing with the chat, Simon Calais says, hello, what effect do you think the invasion of Ukraine will have on the people of the two countries, Ukraine and Russia? Will nationalism be even more widespread, and thus socialism even less popular? I've seen a poll showing that Russians' view of their leadership hasn't changed at all. Opinions are still very favorable. I think one terrible thing that will come out of this is the exponential rise of reactionary politics in the region and beyond. So let me just say, Simon, first of all, thank you for taking the step of looking to the future, looking down the road. I see a lot of analysts just knee-jerk cheering on Russia and war. I mean, cheering on reactionary war is literally the stupidest thing you can do as a Marxist. What we want to do is, even revolutionary war, as I was just tweeting today, even revolutionary war, which has long-term benefits to social justice, is something to be avoided wherever possible in favor of more peaceful struggle and progress. If you get to the end and the capitalists really won't let go, that's one thing. But you want to avoid that. You want as peaceful an end to capitalism as you possibly can get. Because as you start to build socialism, you inherit all of the broken down systems and all the broken down people that come with it, that come through the war. So you don't want that. But reactionary war, on the other hand, this is wholly destructive to the working class. So thank you for posing the question of what happens in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. That's what people need to think about. So anyway, on the subject of Ukrainian nationalism and Russian nationalism, a bunch of things come to mind. So, working backwards, I guess, as far as the exponential rise of reactionary politics, and is this good for us as socialists? Will nationalism be more widespread and socialism less popular? I don't have it at hand, but the statement I read from the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, actually there's a new one out and I haven't read that yet, but the one that I saw two from the chair, Gennady Zyuganov, they basically echoed Putin's line. So that seems to me, a lot of people say that the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, though large, is like controlled opposition of Putin, that it's like highly, it's just tailist and opportunist and all that kind of stuff. I am not an expert on them, but that was how that statement came off to me. So as far as if that's your leadership of the communist movement, that didn't seem great to me. I guess the problems of revisionism and all that stuff at the tail end of the Soviet Union, probably that hasn't been remedied at this point, let's put it that way. And a lot of the people, maybe, from that sort of dinosaur-like past generation of leadership is still, upholding that kind of like liberalization of the USSR type of views while still being in the Communist Party. This is, again, my rough interpretation. I'm not really an expert on post-USSR Communist Party of Russian Federation at all, so please don't take this as that. I know what I hear and I know the little bit that I read, but I'm not a scholar on that subject. But, I don't know, first of all, just as a brief side note, if this is something that is just a question of it's the old generation of leadership in that party, and once the younger generation gets in, kind of you see the same thing in CPUSA by some metrics, like you see people in their 20s and 30s joining CPUSA, and I know some of them like follow and listen to the show, and I have good positive interactions with them, and they're decent comrades out there trying to take their party in a good direction. And then there's some like extreme boomer leadership. Joe Sims, for example, I'll just say by name. I have not read a single thing from that guy that I've liked or Livestream. That's my personal take on it. But you know, a lot of people say in that case of like we need to get the old generation out that's very complacent, and the new generation of like millennials and Gen X and or younger Gen X at least, and like upcoming Gen Z will be much more militant and revolutionary. I don't know if that is the case or if it's going to be like in the Democratic Party where, you know, Biden hands the torch to Buttigieg or somebody like that. I don't know. You know, time will tell. Obviously, struggle will be a factor in that. But that is something that I've noticed there as far as, you know, talking about nationalism in the USSR. Also want to mention, I mentioned this in the stream as far as socialism in Ukraine. The Communist Party of Ukraine has a website. I want to say it's kpu.life. Let me just double check that. It is kpu.life. It's not in English, but you can just paste it into an online translator and read it. I didn't see anything. Well, somebody said that that they were supporting the invasion. I did not see anything to that effect, but I didn't see anything denouncing it. I mean, that's somewhat to be understood. They're in a country that's under martial law right now. So but now addressing the question of Ukrainian nationalism. So something that people have been like badgering me to talk about more, and that I kind of have deliberately avoided up to this point, not because it's not worthy, but I feel like there's such overemphasis on the point. I wanted to emphasize other points in the discussion that I felt were like severely lacking in what's kind of a rapidly unfolding emergency type situation. And as I've said, that's the 2014 Euromaidan thing and the sort of far right turn in the pro-EU faction of Ukraine. So, like I said, a slight majority, about 60% of people in the Ukraine do lean more towards the West, and at times that's been closer to like 70%. And they have favored, if you look at public opinion polls, like membership in NATO or the EU or things like that, because they don't particularly like Russia. Like some of the people being championed, you know, as like it's been kind of this battle between, are we going to have pro-EU, like West-centric leadership in Ukraine, or is it going to be pro-Russian? But there's been very little just kind of about Ukraine. So in a way, after, you know, 2 decades from like, let's say 94 to like 2014 of the back and forth over that, and Ukrainian politics, if you read through the history, not super stable. Not super stable at all. You either get kind of like widely denounced as corrupt pro-Russian leadership that, you know, some people like, and they get some deals with Russia with that, but people are not that satisfied with it. Or you get kind of the pro-EU leadership, but that also has problems, and they're also trying to sell the people out to the IMF and stuff like that. You know, the whole discussion we had before about debt traps and austerity. So, like, neither side is good. In that context of decades of having your country be a pawn between Western Europe and Russia, I can understand a nationalist impulse, particularly like with Putin going out there like Ukraine is not a nation, it's just Lenin made it up and it's an invention of the filthy communists and all that kind of stuff. I would feel fairly threatened by that. I mean, you know, you put yourself in the shoes of the average non-Marxist worker. I can understand a certain nationalist impulse. The problem is that if you don't understand capitalism and you don't understand class struggle, you don't understand that ultranationalism and fascism isn't really a third way. You're just going to get jerked around by the big bourgeoisie. So I can understand it to a point that in 2014, the pro-EU side, you know, some of it is organic protest because there always has been a, you know, slight majority of, I mean, I don't want to say always and somebody's going to be like, oh yeah, well in 2009 there wasn't. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is this is not a new conflict in that sense. It just took on some new dimensions more recently, where the pro-EU faction became more extreme right and the pro-Russia faction literally started to secede from the country. So that's what I'm trying to highlight here. Um, and yeah, in the pro-EU faction, probably installed with the help of the West, is the rise of the far right. I mean, they had marches holding tiki torches and all that stuff. It was very reminiscent of like Charlottesville, things like that. And, you know, obviously that Euromaidan came a little earlier, so it's kind of chicken and egg. I don't doubt that it's all sort of part of the same far right global convergence. Anyway, is there going to be more widespread, you know, deeper Ukrainian ultranationalism and fascism? I think that that is entirely possible. I mean, what I saw from the footage today, assuming it's accurate, is, you know, Russia doing strikes in cities, in civilian populated areas, densely populated areas, at government buildings and different things. Reports of civilians being killed in those airstrikes. So, yeah, I can't imagine that Ukraine's going to come out of this entirely, however they went in before, entirely happy with the way that, you know, Russia is dealing with this, unless maybe you're in one of the areas that seceded. So, as far as this being, quote, one terrible thing that will come out of all this is the exponential rise of reactionary politics. Again, my gut response to this whole thing is I think they're setting up for like a redo of, you know, a world, like World War I. Just kind of starting over again. We've even got a pandemic going on, so it's really like perfect timing. So yeah, I think you're right to have that kind of caution, alarm, and skepticism about the whole thing. And yes, the faction that came to power that did have overt fascists in it, just like the U.S. government, I'll add, in Ukraine, did outlaw the Communist Party. Not that the Communist Party was doing particularly well there. They weren't. That's just something that fascists do. Sort of like the clip I just put up of Donald Trump, you know, declaring war on Marxist, communist, globalists, and socialists in the United States. I don't think that if Trump comes to power, we're going to have a particularly good time. I really don't. People are like, oh, you know, you don't understand. Trump just calls everybody that. Yeah, that's part of the problem, actually, is it's never right-wing enough for them. They will attack everybody. Like that doesn't make me more calm. That makes me more concerned. So anyway, I guess let's move on from that comment. Those are about the other thoughts that I can add. But yeah, what I was saying is I had not been going in detail into the whole like Nazis are running Ukraine thing. I don't think that like they are a faction. That's not to say every last Ukrainian is a Nazi, or even that the entire Ukrainian government is Nazi. It isn't. And so these are like the idea that Putin is going to denazify your country. You know, somebody put up, this is Putin bringing your country a denazification is like Carlsberg's special brew bringing you an alcohol detox. You know, your stint in rehab is sponsored by Budweiser kind of thing. You know, right-wingers cannot denazify countries. Like, look at Germany after World War II. People want to say, and it's true, you know, people want to use it like a pro-Russia talking point of like, NATO's full of Nazis. Yeah, because that's what happens when right-wingers denazify countries. They don't really denazify countries. So, I think that this has been like overemphasized. It's not that it's entirely untrue. It's not. And some of those organic protest movements were partly hijacked by fascists. But I think you can see some of where the nationalist impulse is coming from. It's just as long as you tie that nationalist impulse to capitalism, then it's not a national liberation struggle. It's just something that gets played by the big bourgeoisie. So I guess that's about as clear as I can make that. I'm going to take a sip of water, take the next question. By the way, you know, clearly it helps to get your question in early in the chat because I just can't get to all these during the chat. So the next one, TR Welly. I wrote something I thought you could provide some context. Oh, you wrote something that you thought could provide some context if I'm interested in the ongoing situation with Russia and Ukraine. Can I just say, I mean, not to be rude, but like, I run a Marxist channel. It has 6,500 subs currently. I spend a significant amount of time doing research for this channel. The amount of dozens of people who have been trying to, quote, give me context on Russia-Ukraine. Why do you think I don't have any audiobooks up this week? I have been doing nothing but filling in background, and it always ends with the line that you wrote. I am in no way justifying the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but I'm trying to put some context to it. Yeah, except that's what I hear every time. Like, literally, that's what they all say. Literally, that's what they all say. And it usually does come around to justifying the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I'm sick of fucking hearing it. And this is why I've been blocking people left and right. Just honestly, if you have a particular link you think is good, send me your link. But as far as people coming in and trying to, like, scold me, you're wrong, okay? I don't know what else to tell you. And I'm sick of reading this crap. Who are you? You're some fucking, like, rando. I don't know if you know what you're talking about. You might know what you're talking about, and you might not. But what am I supposed to do? Like, in managing the social media for this, like, channel, which is a small channel, but it still has thousands of people, and I'm trying to actually engage with people. You, a rando, coming up to me and being like, oh, I think you need context. I don't know who you are. So I've been getting a lot of this, and let me just say, if you're trying to get on my bad side, you're on the fast track. I mean, honestly, I just, that has been some of the most irritating stuff that has been going on in the last few days for me. Is like, oh, I'm not trying to justify Russia, but do you know that, the Ukraine has a government? Yeah, I'm aware of that. Thank you very much. If you feel it's that important, you go start a channel, and you go make a video about it, and you go build that channel, and, if you make it through all of that, maybe I will see your video. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be snotty, but, like, this has just really gotten to me over the last few days, and I'm sick of reading it. Do you not think I know? Like, I'm not going to go out and make videos on stuff I don't have any idea what I'm talking about. It's amazing to me. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, then just say you don't agree with what I'm saying. But trying to be this condescending, like, oh, I think you need context. I think you need to fuck off. Anyway, it's hard enough running this channel without having that crap coming up every time I turn around. So anyway, on a personal note, I mean, really, I get what I get through Patreon to run this channel. I don't run ads or anything else. So the time that I put on here is paid by the Patreon, or it's not paid at all. So I do this because I think it's important, but I do spend double digits hours a week on it every single week. Really, like a ton of time, actually. And I just, that takes a lot of work, a lot of time. I'm constantly reading or looking up documentaries to watch or something. And if you disagree. But please, I've that in particular I've probably blocked 100 people in the last few days over it. I'm sick of fucking reading it. All right. So Forza says, a glimpse of the labor movement from Greece, where the communists playing pioneer role. Check that out, comrades. Is this the same link that you posted before? I can't tell. No, that was from ID Communism. All right. I'll make a note of that. That's also from the communists. Yeah, and so Welly goes on with, NATO has missile systems and blah, blah, blah. Of course they do. Of course they do. Anyone speaking on this subject understands that. The issue here is don't pick a side in the imperialist war. If you can't get that through your head, then you don't have any interest in being a Marxist. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So yeah, anyway. I think there are many more comments there, and I think I'm just done with this person for today. There we go. Punch Elder says, I read the Communist Manifesto this year, and I'm getting into Capital Volume 1, and I'm consuming theory because I love to know. What is your opinion of leftist poo-pooing at the idea of reading theory? Obviously, I'm not in favor of it. My entire channel is basically centered on reading theory. All the current events commentary that we do here is based off of reading theory. I'm finding out, the comment continues, that there's a bunch of so-called leftists that are confused, and I feel that comes from a place of ignorance, and they align more with populism, and populism is inherently anti-socialism in my estimation. Yes, I fully concur with that. I've done a lot of anti-populism videos. Populism is a sloppy approximation of what some people think socialism might be. It's not Marxist, it's not Marxist-Leninist. It's winging it, and it's class collaborationist, and it is, particularly as you get into the 20th century, populism becomes more and more explicitly anti-Marxist. So yeah, I completely agree. Good comment. People need to read theory or they don't know what they're talking about. This is why when you join a serious party, pretty much anywhere in the world, they make you study. They make you study because if you don't study, you can't call yourself a scientific socialist. That's like saying, oh, I'm a chemist. I'm a physicist. Oh, really? Where did you study? I didn't study. I just kind of wing it. I did a few experiments in my backyard. I'm good now. No. You need training. This is scientific socialism. So, yeah, you need to read theory. Absolutely. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for people to read theory. I put it on the channel in a non-robotic voice, and I try to add some helpful comments to keep people awake and understanding all the terms that are being used and, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, people absolutely need to read theory. If you don't read theory, don't call yourself a Marxist. It's honestly that simple. Welcome Adobe Cult. Unique name here. Finally caught a live stream. What's up? What's up to you as well? I just want to say about my bitter, angry rant there a minute ago about people I'm not trying to justify Russia, but let me justify Russia. No, I'm sickened at, speaking of, people sloppily trying to approximate Marxism. There's a great example of it. If you're picking sides in an imperialist war, just stop pretending to be a fucking socialist. And I don't want to hear from you. Doing this channel, and I'll try to keep this to a minimum because I've made this point many times, it's difficult enough to just hang out your shingle and be like, we teach Marxism here, and we're trying to, organize for socialism. Watching all the people, it's hard enough just because it has opponents. But then to see all the people calling themselves Marxists and then being beyond opportunistic, beyond right-wing deviation, just being fucking fascist, basically. That is so depressing in and of itself, let alone as war is breaking out. It's broken my heart to see just a major, another major war that specifically has the potential to destabilize the entire global economy and to possibly drag the entire world down into armed conflict. That's so depressing. And then to have just all these hundreds of people dogpiling on with cheering on imperialism. It's just not putting up with shit like that is why I wanted to make this channel in the first place, to educate people better. And when people come on and try to fucking drag me down in their illiterate opportunist bullshit, I'm sorry, I wish there was a stronger option than block. All right. Angry Max Fury Street says, whenever I talk to libertarians, I feel like they don't really know what a state is. Libertarians don't know fucking anything. They seem to think a bunch of businessmen with no state won't just make a state eventually because the state serves capital, not the other way around. That old 80s movie got it right. When it comes to the game of war, the only way to win is for no one to play. That is War Games, and it's a very fun movie. Also, I don't think enough people are talking about the neo-Nazi group in Ukraine being a literal part of their official military. Yes, it is. Okay, those were three fairly disconnected points. So, as far as libertarians and the state, yeah, so I've said this many times, the state is a product of class society. In class society, slave society, feudalism, capitalism, socialism. The ruling class, whoever that is, in capitalism, it's the bourgeoisie, in socialism, it's the proletarians. The ruling class sets up a state to enforce and further their class interests. The proletarian state tries to build socialism, working towards communism, fighting against imperialism, whatever kind of capitalism remains in the world. That's the purpose. So yeah, libertarian capitalists who think they can somehow have capitalism without a state. I was talking about this last night because the U.S. left has been so thoroughly corrupted by, quote, libertarian anti-war people. You can't have anti-war capitalism. It's not possible. If you think anarcho-communism is idealist, I mean, anarcho-capitalism is just insane. If you don't have a state, who's going to enforce your private property rights? Oh, I'll hire private security. Okay, and then the private security firm becomes a fucking state, and the dues that you pay it are taxes. Ding! Congrats, you just reinvented capitalism. So that's how that works. The state is a product of class society, and just as you can't really go straight from capitalism to anarcho-socialism, you can't have anarcho-capitalism either, because it's class society. The only way you can abolish the state completely is through the abolition of class society. Now, there's a distinction left-wing anarchists don't understand, that also social democrats don't understand. Social democrats think that we keep the capitalist state, but just regulate it and transform it. Wrong. And then anarcho-communists think that, or libertarian socialists think that we abolish the bourgeois state and then don't build anything in its place. Both are incorrect. What you do is, as Lenin said in The State and Revolution, abolition of the parasite state, and then you build, that is, you do abolish the bourgeois state, but then you build a proletarian state, which has entirely new mechanisms. Soviet Russia was an example of what the new machinery of that workers' state can be. But yeah, libertarians don't understand anything. It's kind of a defining trait of libertarians. I mean, and a lot of what they champion, like when they talk about, I was talking with somebody on Twitter, I think, about this today. Just taking a sip here. When libertarians have, for example, their rallying cry, 1776, freedom. What was going on in 1776? Had the Industrial Revolution really caught on at that point? No. You had an agrarian society. It was the overthrow of feudal monarchies by capitalism. It's an entirely different stage of technological progress. So the idea that we can just go back to 1776, no, you can't, because you don't have the conditions of 1776. This is why we study historical materialism, dialectical materialism, because you need to understand class struggle. As Marx said, the history of society is the history of class struggle. That's what you need to understand. Everything else is really a product of that, class society and a different class ruling society. And the difference, where I move on to the next comment, is once you reach socialism, the proletariat is finally the first class, the first ruling class that is not a minority. It's the overwhelming majority of society. And in fact, part of the purpose of socialism, like the, running the workers' state and building socialism, is completing the proletarianization that capitalism began. Because under capitalism, the bourgeoisie is not going to proletarianize itself, but it will proletarianize almost everyone else. There will still be probably some small petty bourgeoisie, and of course the bourgeoisie itself. It's only when the proletariat takes over that says, okay, now we're going to wield new state machinery to proletarianize the rest of you, that little corner in the corner that you couldn't get to before. And boom, proletarianization complete, classless society, because everyone is in the same class. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Angry Max Fury Street says, hello, you talked about how you were part of Occupy Wall Street in 2011. Yeah, I did go to Occupy stuff. I remember bourgeois media trying to delegitimize the movement from the get-go by painting everyone as a hippie who needs a shower, etc. Could you please tell us what was actually going on in the movement, what could have gone better? Yeah, although, I was in my area, and, I don't know what was going on everywhere else. Um, it was people mad about 2008 and their rapidly declining standards of living. Maybe they had been foreclosed on. That was a big issue at that time. Banks like robo-signing foreclosures and stuff fraudulently. So it was people coming out from kind of, the broad U.S. left. You had social democrats and anarchists. It was actually the call for the protest, which just really started as a one-off, was from Adbusters magazine, which has like an anarchist bent. It's kind of like a media criticism, new left type of thing. I had read Adbusters before. It was, fun enough as a read. They would have some satire and some interesting visuals in there, for example. But they just put out this call, like, for... So remember when people did flash mobs? That was like kind of a thing back in the past. It was like kind of not. I don't know if it was explicitly referred to as that, but it was kind of this like, let's just go out and do this protest, and it like turned into this thing where people started copying it all over the country, because lo and behold, there was a lot of dry kindling there. There was a lot of fresh grievances. People were not happy with what was going on. And, also there were people who had been involved in, say, the anti-war left in the 2000s who had been wondering, where did all the protesters go? Why are we not hitting the streets? And people say, oh, people stop hitting the streets because the government doesn't care. Yeah, that's not why. That's not why. Bush and Cheney helped to erect a new kind of police state in this country. Also, for younger people, you're not going to appreciate this. Surveillance cameras were kind of not really a thing on the level that they became in the 2000s in, say, the 1990s. So that whole thing, just having your picture taken in public, let alone video, this was like highly unusual before that. People didn't have camera phones and stuff like that. So as far as, where did the protest movement go? I think there was a massive chilling effect during the Bush-Cheney years, and people were still coming to grips with, like, how do we get back out there without, having this new, like, war on terror police state, like, coming down on our heads. So anyway, what I saw from Occupy was, like, fairly innocuous, lots of ANCOMs, although that's the U.S. left. Particularly in 2011, that's what was going on. So people protesting just all kinds of economic grievances. It was the first, like, economically focused mass, like, there was a lot of kind of ex-middle class people there. And, a lot of it was like, hey, 2008 was this first major shot to the economy, like major instability. It rocked the economy. A lot of people who had been pretty comfortable before that suddenly weren't. So it was the beginning of this sort of really bad time that we're still in. People, it was a lot easier to be like a little bit better off back before 2008. Even, I was like not that well off during the 2000s, but you could still like have kind of a life. Now I feel like it's just like a constant grind for existence. It's really bad now compared to 10 or 15 years ago. It's really, really, really bad now. Another 5 years from now, we're going to see like, I don't even know what. Like this is already worse than I thought it was going to get before people really got out in numbers. And like I said, people did get out in numbers in 2020. But as soon as people had to go back to work, the protests stopped. So as far as people who, hippies who need a shower, were there hippies there? Yeah. Were there people who needed showers there? So part of it was like tent city protests. That was like a common feature of an Occupy protest in any city or area, was people would camp in tents and make an encampment as part of the protest. I don't know if people know this, but like, there aren't public showers out on the street, so, sometimes like people could smell bad. It was what it was. I didn't see really anything overly unfortunate in my area going on. I'm sure some of us, something did. I'll bet there's documentaries you can find about it. Anyway, beyond that, I don't know. It was people making economic demands for the first time in like forever in the U.S. Particularly like, a lot of people who got their lives destroyed during 2008. So a lot of like ex-middle class people had money in the stock market. Not to say that it was like that protest, because the vast majority of people that I interacted with at Occupy were kind of more of, I guess, there's like SOCDEM, like liberal type, peace movement liberals types. I don't know. We're rebuilding the left. What can I say? That's another reason I do this channel, is to just get some more substance in there. All right. KR class struggle. So, and unique name here, actually, I shouldn't skip over. Whenever I see people bring it up, this is talking about the Nazis in the Ukrainian government, is usually met with a dismissive, but it's just one group. So I just said it's just one group. I don't say that because I'm trying to say that everything going on in Ukraine is great. It's not. That festering conflict between the two factions in the country has festered it's escalated to a really severe point. But it is a fact that it's just one group. It's not everyone in the country. It's not even the whole government. So that is a fact. I'm not out here going like, it's just one group, go US. Like, that's not it at all. But you're being incorrect if you say that everyone in Ukraine is a Nazi. That's not true. So, and also, if you want to dismantle, like I was saying before, if you want to like dismantle some of that nationalism or counter some of that nationalism, understand some of where it's coming from. I mean, you can understand Ukraine not wanting to be a pawn, but any national struggle needs to not tie itself to capitalism and reaction. Okay. All right. KR Class Struggle says, does anyone know how right-wingers like Fox News, OAN, etc. are interpreting all this business in Ukraine? I mean, I think they are they're not pro-Russia. Let's put it that way. I haven't been watching. What little I have seen, it was like Tucker Carlson is a Russian asset was trending. What little I've seen from Fox News in just like blips on Twitter was the standard U.S. warmongering. I mean, that's the thing, is like when it comes down to questions like this, should the U.S. invade a country? The answer is always yes. The answer is always yes. Let's see. Charmander says, or the president is Jewish. Yeah, I'm not even going to get into this today because I think, again, a lot of these talking points, they're not leading to any greater clarity. They're not getting at the basic issues that are going on in this conflict. People are using it to cheer for their side or the other, and that's not the kind of discourse that I want to feed into. We want discourse that centers the international proletariat, doesn't pick sides with imperialists, counters reactionary nationalism, works towards revolution. All right? If you're not doing all those things, you're doing it wrong. And hey, if you're not a Marxist, great. But go stand with the fucking nationalists where you belong. All right. Adiov, have I heard of the Japanese Red Army? They were big supporters of Palestine and worked with PFLP. Actually, I have not. I'll make a note of it, though. That will go on my things to look up when I get the time list. All right. All right. What else do we have here? Do I have an ETA for the Black Shirts and Reds audiobook? I have not done any work on it since this Russia-Ukraine thing started. So no, I do not. Mikey, a lot of replies to other people. Punch Elder says, I put in 65 hours last week and that's just to survive. I feel you. You'll see these right-wingers, like, I remember being in a public setting, and there was some worker having a discussion with a boss or something. And as the boss walked away, I guess the guy was trying to get more work or something, but he goes, 80 hours don't scare me. And I'm just like, I can't even, I mean, I don't know what the maximum it's a lot. I mean, basically, I've had a job that basically never turned off, but I don't know exactly what the hour count was. But I'd be at home and I'd have to be like on call responding to stuff. So I've had that experience. That's not fun. Although I wasn't at work, 65 or 70 or 80 hours a week. But I swear the stuff people put up with, it just drags down standards for everybody. I don't mean you. I mean the people who are enthusiastic or like, 80 hours don't scare me. And it's just like, I would die within 2 weeks of doing 80 hours of a job. It's just, for me personally, it's not possible. I had one job where the manager like gave me a sixth day, because I mentioned like I needed money, and I did it for a while, and I was like, yeah, I'm about to lose my mind. Like I can't actually do this because I was in school at the time and like other stuff. It was just like I'm like I appreciate you're trying to give me more hours, but like holy shit, people work too fucking much. There's no need for people to be working this much. I mean, there's no like inherent scarcity, natural scarcity reason for it. So what do we have? Adobe called, at the risk of sounding like an economist, it is heartening to see the American labor force work so hard toward unionization lately. It doesn't replace socialist organizing, but in successful cases it may provide workers with the rest they need to organize outside of work. Yeah, well, like I said at the beginning, you need mass organizations. So, your vanguard parties, that's one aspect of it. That's the most class conscious leading edge of the proletariat. You need mass organizations as well. You need a labor movement. You absolutely do. Otherwise, what do you think it's going to, and I don't mean you, but I mean to people who believe otherwise, what do you think? You're going to have totally disorganized workers suddenly just start spontaneously organizing effective strikes? You need people to be organized. Now you have to fight against complacency and concessionism and opportunism in the labor union management. That's obviously, on the staff. You can't have people who are working with the capitalists. Absolutely. But you do need mass organizations. To Noah, from what did... Oh, no, that was to somebody else. Eddie, the average American doesn't care or know where Ukraine is. They want better lives and workers' rights. Yeah, I haven't been interacting. I've mostly, in the past few days, been confining my dialogue and discourse to other people on the far left. So I haven't been doing a lot of like mass messaging so much because when the fucking, quote, Vanguard is getting it wrong, and that's not to say there are parties out there that have gotten it right and aren't picking sides. So definitely that. But as far as, the masses out there that, they hear something on cable news and they're like, I stand with Ukraine. And to be fair to them, Russia is attacking Ukraine. It certainly looks, if you don't know any of the backstories, most people don't, it doesn't make Russia look particularly good, as indeed I don't think that this was a wise move in Russia's self-interests, nor is it in any way good for the working class of anywhere. But I'm not overly hard on the people who are coming from a good place, who don't want to see countries invaded, and just don't know all the facts. I think you can work a lot more with that than you have with people doing like, Olympic gold medal mental gymnastics to like Russia is anti-imperialist or some shit. So, all right. So as far as on the Where is Fox News, Angry Max Fury Street says, Tucker Carlson says, quote, why are you mad at Putin? Putin never did anything to you personally. He's not the one teaching critical race theory in your schools, just using it as an opportunity to attack Democrats. I think I would stop you, though, before it's theater. It's not theater. That's political messaging. That's effective propaganda that will get the GOP to, covertly, or not covertly, but like casually support Putin. Tucker Carlson says don't oppose them. Okay. People thinking in a binary way, they'll think, okay, he must not be that bad. And that's what they get. So it's theater. No, that's casually telling your audience it's not a big deal. A lot of people have gotten really mad at me for saying that it is a big deal. It is. So I'm not Tucker Carlson, Anyway, Continuing. What else do we have? So Frank Deluxe says, interesting side note regarding Communist Party of Russian Federation. Gennady Zyuganov was the leader that Boris Yeltsin beat in the U.S. rigged 1996 election. Yeah, there almost was a Communist Party comeback in the elections. I mean, that was a long time ago. Like, that was 25 years ago. It doesn't speak well to defeating bureaucracy and all that kind of stuff when that guy is still the head of things, I guess. So, maybe open a window, get some fresh air moving. I'm just going to pause for another second, taking a quick break. Be right back. All right, we're back. So, I just want to add, again, we're touching on the Nazis in Ukraine thing. Yes, that's part of the government, etc. Also, for people, you know what? I'm not even going to go there. All right. Spider Dijon says there are plenty of Gen Z that say reactionary shit from my perspective. Very depressing. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the case. Maybe they're the people whose parents still have money. I don't know. But I think as more and more Gen Z people get out there and find out what this economy is all about, I think that number has the potential to drop, let's put it that way. I will say, though, like some of the TikTok shit I see, man, TikTok kind of sucks. That's like, I actually did make an S4A TikTok to put some shorter clips on, I guess. But I gotta say, I don't find that platform super compelling. I don't know what it is exactly about it, but the comedy that comes out of TikTok is like not that funny. And I don't know what it is, but a lot of it is depressing. Even things that aren't like reactionary politically explicitly. It's a lot of like weird, like, when I watch like compilations of TikToks, which I sometimes do to just like, veg out and have a laugh. There's a lot of like depressing, like boomery couples fighting with each other type of stuff, or like couples being shitty to each other type of stuff. It's very weird. I really don't know where that's coming from, but yeah, I'm not like a big fan of TikTok. Frank Deluxe says their statement, I guess, of CPRF or KPRF, depending on what you're reading from, of 21st of February struck me funny along the same lines as S4A as well. Although I'm far from an expert on the matter, very interesting to consider, and there's lots to learn all around. Yeah, I didn't think those were great statements. So, what else do we have? Unique name here. Do you think I should join an org if I'm a pretty busy person day to day? Yeah. Yeah. Everyone should be in an org of some kind. You need to have lifelines to the masses. You need to be involved in the community. Even if you don't have a lot of time to show up to things, you should show up to things occasionally. Pay your dues money. Support what you can. Stay in the loop. Know what's going on. All of those are benefits of being in an organization. Plus, for the people who do show up regularly, it's nice for them to know that you have their back out there, that they have the support. So yeah, do join an org. Mikey says Putin isn't allowed to talk about Ukraine how I talk about Canada. Uh, I'm not even. I don't think that's a particularly good analogy, but I'm gonna not comment further. M37F says, "Hey S4A, hey chat. I watched that Finball video you posted in the community tab, and he definitely made some good points and pushed me further in your direction. The only thing I've been hung up on, if we assume Russia is a socialist country in this situation, well, let me stop you right there. It's not. Hasn't been socialist for 30 years. So let's just let that sink in for a moment. How would it behave differently? That would be an entirely different scenario where a different ruling class, like in terms of it being a reactionary war or a revolutionary war, entirely different dimensions. There would be so many different conditions in that case. I don't know where to begin talking about it. I guess that's my basic thing. I don't know why you're even making that comparison. If you read the Lenin piece, let me do it again. I'll bring it up right now. Defeat of one's okay. So the first line of Lenin's The Defeat of One's Own Government in the Imperialist War, it's right in the title, Imperialist War. So if it was still the Soviet Union, it wouldn't be an imperialist war. Therefore, entirely different standards. The first line is, during a reactionary war, a revolutionary class cannot but desire the defeat of its government. Well, okay, in that case, the revolutionary class would be controlling industry and the seats of power. So if you can start to see how the comparison breaks down, it's not the same. It's not the same. So as far as, also, I guess this is not directly related to the question, but it's a comment I think that's worth making. For the NATO defenders who have said, well, NATO is a defensive alliance. No, because you could say it's defensive against the USSR perhaps, but not against the Warsaw Pact, because NATO formed prior to the Warsaw Pact by years. The Warsaw Pact, in fact, was the defensive thing. So, I don't know. I guess let me just put this out there. And I've been extremely hard on the movement because, again, picking sides in an imperialist war is like a cardinal sin. Do not fucking do that. And I've been seeing so many people doing that. I've been spending my time calling it out. Let me go a little bit easier on another mistake that people are making, that I can understand why you're doing it, but you need to stop doing it, but I don't want to be as hard on you for this. When you get analysis from the bourgeois media, and that includes the alternative media that isn't socialist, you're not getting a Marxist analysis. You're getting people trying to compare present-day Russia to the Soviet Union, or saying that Putin is trying to rebuild the USSR, or this or that, because they never understood class conflict in the first place. They never understood that the USSR was not run by the capitalist class and that the interests were different and that it would behave differently. So why I'm going easier is I can see where you get these sort of weird, not thinking in class conflict terms, class struggle terms. But when you're listening to any bourgeois or petty bourgeois analyst of the situation, and they're making those goofy comparisons and coming up with incorrect conclusions, you've got to account for that by independently applying Marxist analysis to the situation and what's being said and making the corrections that are necessary. You can't just say, oh, if Russia was socialist, what would it do in this situation? This situation grew out of the fact that the Soviet Union stopped existing. So you can't even ask that question. You see what I'm saying? Part of the reason why Ukraine is in this tug of war between Europe and Russia is because it's no longer part of the Soviet Union. So, anyway, that's really less my frustration with baby socialists and more my frustration with the idiocy that passes for analysis in bourgeois media. But you, as younger Marxists need to start correcting for that, and I just would like to see a lot more of that out there. Hopefully that's helpful. All right. What else do we have? All right. A little more talk of the Nazi element in Ukraine. I just don't see this going anywhere. If you, again, think Putin is denazifying Ukraine, please leave the chat. Just go somewhere else. All right, I lost my place in the chat, so I got to get back up there. I think we're there now. Okay, here we go. Look at Africa, look at the South America, look at the world, look at the Western world. What are they doing in others' country? M. Curson says. Yeah. Health Revolt asks, I hear reactionaries talk about the Great Reset. How much of the Great Reset is actually the bourgeoisie's stated public plan, and should we as socialists read the Great Reset? Whatever the bourgeoisie says that it intends to do, I mean, first of all, Biden has Build Back Better World. You think that's ever going to happen? They had Build Back Better Domestic. You think that's ever going to happen? They say these things sometimes. You got to really take it with a grain of salt. Stick to your own independent class analysis. They put all these plans out there. Sometimes they do some of them. And, in that case, I don't know what to comment on of that. But, it's one of these sticky things, the topic of the Great Reset. The right wing picks these things up. It's sort of like how they used to talk about the New World Order. I, at one point in time, thought you might be able to talk about the New World Order using that term and reframing it as global capitalism. You really can't. Once things are right-wing buzzwords, including patriotism for that example, there's just really a limited amount you can do with it. So I haven't put a lot into sort of trying to do like a socialist take on the Great Reset. Is it possible? I'll tell you what. I'll write it down. Socialist take on Great Reset. I haven't really sat down to formulate it, so, I don't know if I would get to complete that or if I would find a reason that it wouldn't work and give up on it halfway through, but maybe I'll give it a look. It's on the list. Anyway, Simon Calais says, I think that the Russian Communist Party is controlled opposition and revisionist. The Communist Party we have here in Hungary is also revisionist like that. And let me just say, this is what I hear from everybody. I mean, I think it's the exception that they're not. And again, this isn't just the result of me individually analyzing all these things. It's what I hear from people constantly. I mean, could everyone be wrong? I guess, but I do hear this quite a bit. Anyway, this might be a characteristic of 21st century communist movements of Eastern Europe, socially conservative, economically revisionist. I'd like to applaud that because I think that does seem to be like a pretty standard outcome. Just taking a sip here. Okay. The parties are remnants of the old 80s peak revisionist period. Yeah, this is exactly what I was saying. The parties are remnants of the late 80s peak revisionist period, and their old age also explains the conservatism. Meanwhile, young people are led away from Marxism by mainstream liberalism. That's me applauding. Excellent point. I really agree with that. This is a problem in the U.S. where it's like, I was reading a Mao document, earlier in the month, I think. It was not long ago. And he's talking about how, when you have a right deviation, it holds up the revolution. When you correct the right deviation, the revolution proceeds forward again. When you have a left-wing deviation, it holds up the movement. When you correct the left-wing deviation, then the movement moves forward again. The movement has not been fucking moving. Okay? Can we all agree on that? The movement hasn't been agreeing. Excuse me. I'm tired. Been doing this for 2 hours now. The movement has not been moving forward. If we can agree that the movement hasn't been moving forward, then can we agree that it is due to errors being made by the movement? And, CPUSA, I think, probably deserves a lot of shit that they get. I mean, I've gotten into things where they're like, I'm like, yeah, but your party can't even respond to people within 2 months of them contacting you for membership. And literally to that, somebody brought up McCarthyism. I'm like, McCarthyism is the reason that you couldn't respond to your new member before 7 weeks after they like contacted you? That is, I mean, that's a joke. You know, if your organization is going to put up excuses like that, don't expect to be taken seriously, and especially don't expect to. I don't even want to say the phrase "lead a revolution" in the same sentence. I mean, you wouldn't be able to lead a little league, baseball tournament, like, let alone, be the party of the revolution or whatever. In fact, I think there's a decent case that it's holding up progress for exactly the kinds of reasons that were just described there. You got these like dinosaurs from the late 80s peak revisionist period, or people from the 90s when just no one expected anything to like ever happen again. And part of that is, that mentality blocking progress. That's part of it. And in the meantime, people will check out something like that. And then if it doesn't work, then they do get picked off by mainstream liberalism, which is constantly, the Democrats are constantly, or, other liberal parties in other countries, whatever it is, even more social democratic things, they're constantly trying to co-opt socialist ideas and water them down with capitalism. Always. They're always trying to do that. That's why, like, some of the people trying to come to Marxism from, like, a socially conservative perspective or, like, ex-Republican perspective even, they're like, oh, you're saying woke shit like the Democrats. No. Democrats corrupted socialist ideas into that, like, hollowed out, partially social justice, partially economic imperialist thing that they have going on. It doesn't, anyway, it's frustrating. We're not going to fix it on the stream today. Let me put it that way. So I'm just going to keep moving on. What else? Health Revolt asks, why can't we assume World War III will be an example of class cooperation among imperialist countries as opposed to capitalist infighting in Lenin's day? Russia and U.S. both have infrastructure in place for profiting from war and climate warming. After reading Smedley Butler, I know war is a racket. Russia wants in on the action. The bourgeoisie wins. So, I'm getting tired. We've been going for 2 hours. I'll probably wrap up after this. So, I think that this is somewhat of a mischaracterization. You can say that the world wars, yes, obviously the military-industrial complex gets more. It's a process of capital being consolidated. It's just that it's a violent reaction. I guess that's maybe how I would recast this. So you're correct. Capitalism still has the same overall trend. It's just that, it's a clash of egos. It's a clash of national egos, you could say. Ultimately, capitalism works towards the consolidation of capital in fewer and fewer hands and the proletarianization of more and more of the population. However, it doesn't always go smoothly. So it's not to say that like the world wars are like super calculated in that sense. I mean, they may make specific plans within them, but the process the process is, in other words, one overall of capital becoming consolidated. But I'm trying to think of like a chemistry or physics example. It's like, let's say you set up a really strong vacuum, like a vacuum hose, and then you put a funnel at the end, and then you put like, 3 oranges. Let's say that the vacuum tube is like standard, house cleaner vacuum tube. You put 3 oranges at the end, and so they're all trying to get sucked through the thing at the same time. As you keep cranking the power on the vacuum, eventually you're going to have enough force that those oranges are going through. But it may not be a neat process. There may be quite a lot of mess and sort of a violent, sudden reaction when it actually does happen. So things get broken in the process. That said, those three oranges wind up, as one mass, just not exactly in the original shape that they were in. That's the analogy that I can, I guess, come up with for you right now, and that'll have to do. Anyway, let's find another comment or two to just finish up with, because my brain is tired. Let's see. Forza says, the whole point is that the USA... Okay, this is good. I like Forza's comments so far today, and let's end on the whole point, because why not? The whole point is that the USA is the main aggressor because it is on top of the imperialist pyramid. If Russia was on top, it would do the same things. Obviously not exactly the same, because there are cultural and I would say situational differences. Let's hope the socialist and anti-imperialist pyramid camp will destroy the imperialist system sooner rather than later. Yeah. I hope we're all in agreement on that at this point. The USA is the most responsible because it has the most power. As we know, with great power comes great responsibility. But seriously, I mean, it's the EU, USA, NATO, IMF. They have their hands, their hands more on the levers of power in the global economy. Definitely. So they're more responsible for a lot of things that happen in the world. But as other capitalist becoming imperialist rivals come along, that doesn't mean they're not responsible either. So anyway, I wanted a bigger finish. So let's see if we can dig through the comments and find something else in here. Okay. So, M. Kirsten says the Western world wouldn't be stopped in Ukraine except they occupied the whole world or we end it. So I think that's actually that's the point I'll end on, because it comes directly off of the other point. So that's what people need to understand here. It's not like NATO is gonna not keep expanding. If you are a Marxist, you know that imperialism has to keep doing that. So you wouldn't expect anything else. And if they have to lie about it, of course they're going to lie. Why would you expect anything else? Like this whole expecting moral behavior or something bizarre. It's imperialism. What do you expect? It's disgusting. It's the worst thing on earth. Of course it's going to do horrible things. But also, as Russia grows, it has to do the same thing too. This is capitalism. So this is just something people need to understand. Ukraine happens to be one of the points where these two rival factions are having a big tug of war. But it's their fight, not ours. Our fight is against both of them. Oh, you know what? I'm going to end on this. This will probably be going into the comments on the Lenin video, but I wanted to mention this on the subject of revolutionary defeatism. There's been so many distortions of this entire topic. I had somebody yelling at me on Twitter, in DMs no less. They were like, revolutionary defeatism means you criticize your own bourgeoisie. You can't say anything about anybody else's bourgeoisie. It's like literally just trying to silence any criticism of Russia. Insane stuff. No, so let me recast that for you. Revolutionary defeatism means defeat all around. It means embracing the proletariat across national borders in international class struggle against the bourgeoisie. It means that your country's quote-unquote bourgeoisie is no more my friend than my country's bourgeoisie is. It means that you, being from another nation, are not any less my class ally for being in that other country. It means a recasting of alliances along class rather than national borders. So this idea that nothing can be said. What Lenin said is that you take an international approach when you're doing your you take a national or local approach in your propaganda, adapting an internationalist message to local conditions. that does in no way preclude you from also opposing a foreign bourgeoisie. That is the most insane thing ever. What, you just let capitalism, like, or anyway. I wasn't sure I was going to do this stream today because I just wasn't feeling it, but we got through 2 hours. Hopefully all that was clear. I'm going to sign off now. Thanks to everyone who showed up with a question or comment. I'm still pretty disgusted with a lot of the ongoing discourse about this, and if you keep watching the channel, you can expect to have me expressing more of that disgust until I see like a lot more of the discourse going down a better track. I don't expect it really. I expect some improvements, but I expect that this is going to continue to be a problem. Look at my last video for some idea of this. The title of it is "With Nukes at Stake, Nobody Wants Your Terminally Online Take on What Is, Quote, Technically Imperialist." And I continued that title in the pinned comment, which was, "It is less than useless and some of the most off-putting and grotesquely hair-splitting discourse I've ever seen in my life." And that's how it hits most people. This terminally online, Russia's an anti-imperialist freedom force. This makes you look fucking batshit when you go out there with that stuff. It looks batshit to me. It's disgusting and appalling to me. It's disgusting and appalling to a lot of people. So you need to get out of that. And if you're still making statements with, "This isn't meant to justify Russia, but," maybe just don't make the statement. At least don't make it on mine, because I am well past the point of wanting to listen to it. Anyway, that said, thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are not on the screen, but will be in every other video that isn't a live stream. And, these live streams are, for now anyway, a regular thing. Tuesday and Saturday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern for a couple of hours. I may cut back to one a week at some point, but I'm going to keep the 2 a week for now. It is it's been a trying week, and I'm really concerned about this conflict blowing up into something bigger. If we can barely manage any kind of online discourse now, that will only get worse and worse and worse. Get organized, because you need to be in a party that put out a correct line. Actually, that's a really important point. When people are asking what kind of organization to join an organization that got this issue right. Because if you get into an organization that got this issue wrong, you're also probably going to be in a position where you're being asked to support an incorrect line on the next major crisis that erupts too. All right, with that, we will see you soon. Like I said, have a video coming on the Fed raising interest rates and what that may mean in terms of an economic crash, which only raises the prospects of war even further, as well as other videos, and I will be getting back into the audiobooks ASAP. There's, like I said, just been a lot happening. All right, thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next video.